Can we start? Okay, good morning. So we had a interesting, so what I got from all of you is that you enjoyed yesterday also. And it was interesting also. But some people said that it's the first time we are doing this. So obviously, sometime you have to do things like first time. But having said that, purely from the method point of view or exploring this sort of a scenario, right? I mean, this sort of scenario, first of all, is the writing the scenario. Second is, of course, exploring the scenario. Exploring the scenario from multiple perspectives, right? So even if we do not know how a particular decision is taken, but we being put in that particular spot in a sort of a crisis situation and representing a particular nation or decision-making structure of a nation, of course, is the sort of a experiential input, and there is no accuracy and predictability about it, right? We're not, oh yeah, Varun has come. So we are discussing what we did. So obviously there are two parts to it. Writing the scenario, that itself is a field itself, right? There are methods and techniques of scenario planning and also strategy. I mean, looking at long-term strategies, people do this, what is called a futures research. And futures, obviously, am I audible? So futures, there is a field of sort of looking at futures as we discussed in the class also. When we talk about futures, we are talking about a statement about future, and which is basically what we call the prognosis. Just like diagnosis, we are basically talking about prognosis about future. Coming up with a statement about future that we can sort of say this has some validity. That is what we want to create. I mean, that is what prognosis is. Right? Now, how to create prognosis? There are multiple ways. So you can actually release a statement, which is called prediction. Right? Second is forecasting. A third is prospecting. So in this sort of a scenario, we are trying to figure out how to do prospecting, which is exploring the possibilities and the drivers and maybe these interlinkages between these variables that may play out. Obviously, we cannot really call it a prediction, and we also cannot call it a forecast. What we are doing in this sort of scenario is to sort of play out the drivers of human decision making, which you are representing a particular type of human being or in a particular situation, owning a responsibility of the nation, right? So that we are trying to simulate, right? By becoming them, whom we do not know who they are, but we are some sort of assumption we have that this is the type of behavior, type of capabilities, type of resources the nations have, and therefore they may behave the way you are proposing, right? Obviously, so this is not about prediction. This is not about a scientific determinism, so to say, right? It is really about trying to figure out what could happen in these sort of scenarios and feel the stress that you or a decision maker may have, right? So that sort of stress and also the constraints and also positions that people take may really be a sort of a view where if you have to model this, if you have to create a deterministic model or stochastic model also, you really need to think about the uncertainties which all these dynamics plays out. So it is part of the dynamics sort of a analysis, but this is much more richer, much more what is called a wicked problem, because when you touch the problem changes. The problem that you are trying to solve, if you try to sort of do some sort of a solutioning to that whatever problem, the problem transforms itself to something new, something different. And that is where this becomes what is called a wicked problem. wickedness of the problems, right? So there's a term called wicked problem, came in 1973. So, okay. So that is one part they wanted to share and also look at what we have done. So I'm just going to sort of look at your inputs that we got so that we get this fluid piece perspective that we created. So obviously the first part of how to write these sort of scenarios, of course, we haven't learned, but that is of course a very detailed type of process, and there is a scenario writing field itself. And Rand Corporation started it, and then private companies like Shell actually sort of made it their strategic framework of writing long-term scenarios. And Shell company defeated British oil in 70s when oil crisis came. Why? Because they were able to write better scenarios of future. And that is their Shell company, CEO of Shell company, and also there is a book called Art of Long View from the person who actually did that. So that is available. I mean, we can explore those sort of things, okay? But the point that I'm making is writing scenarios is one part, but getting into the decision maker's shoes and trying to play what those decision making aspects will be is what we are trying to sort of understand. Okay? So that was the key message here. So what we did yesterday is, of course, all these inputs that we got, and then I'll just sort of, each team created these sort of fill this template. So about the situation report, based on the scenario, each team has given us this particular framework about what they perceive about other 4 teams, right? Based on the scenario. So that was the first part. So what exactly do you think other 4 countries will do? Other 4 teams, which are representing the countries or the nations in the scenario, what they will do based on the scenario. That was your perception. Okay, so that is the first column, first row on this is your perception of what the rest of the other 4 teams will do. Okay, and then based on that perception, the second one is saying, if they do ABC, what you have written in the first row, what will be the impact on your country or you based on the scenario and what they will do in that scenario. That is the second part, second column or second row, right? Then we are saying your strategic posture, long-term posture against them based on understanding of your history as well as your previous engagements with them and a future possibility. What is your long-term strategic sort of a stance that you will take against or with them, or in what proportion it will be? That's the next. Then we say, since their action is going to impact you in this scenario, what you should do. So some counter you will do because now you have a specific sort of a action that he is going to do. Therefore, I should do something. That is where the counter part comes. Once you do that counter, so you will say that if he does A, I will do B, C, D, whichever, and maybe B, C, D will have implications, losses or gains or some sort of a benefits or maybe some sort of a change that your actions will take. That is what we are calling expected losses or gains from their actions and your countermeasures. And anything else in this sort of a thing, you can actually continue. Okay, so this was the question and this was the format. Okay. That was first. And once we have done this situation report and analysis, we have some elements of possible strategy that we can create. Okay, strategic inputs for us to create our strategic actions that we should be doing. Some actions we have to do. So based on this, plus of course your understanding of scenario and also the ideas that can come in the discussion, we said you fill up your, what are the key sort of a courses of actions or strategies or plans that you have to act, to change the so scenario. Obviously, if you feel that scenario has no impact on you, on your country, then obviously you say we'll continue, we are not going to take any action. But if you're saying that there is an impact on you in some form, you have to act or counteract. Or secondly, you say, even if there is an impact, I do not worry, do not care. Then of course you are not the person who is the decision maker. But if you are that person and you are actually asked to do by your nation You remember nation has four things, right? What are the four aspects of a nation we discussed in the class? When you say nation state, what are the four elements? Sorry? Territory, population of citizens, sovereignty, and government, right? The four elements make a nation state. And obviously, if you are a government or you have sovereignty to take decisions, then you have a responsibility for your citizens because they have chosen you to take that decision or given you the responsibility. Right? That's what we are saying. So you have been chosen by the citizens of your country, which has the nation state identity associated or tagged along with the culture. So therefore, you are in the hot seat, so to say. Okay. So you have to take some actions, right? So what I'm trying to say is you cannot keep this blank, this sheet. So you have to actually write something here, or not something. You have to write a strategic plan or strategies or actions that you are going to take to counter the actions or possible emergence of possibilities which will impact your sovereignty, your government, your territory, and your people adversely, right? That is what exactly we said we are going to study in this course, threats to the nation, right? So the scenarios actually give threatening or threat, how they manifest. That's the whole point about this, right? So then we said you write those specific actions, and obviously you are going to do these actions with some objective in mind, some outcome in mind. So we said you just qualify those outcomes, whether they are military outcomes, whether it's a geopolitical outcome, whether it's a sort of an economic outcome that you are looking at, or some other aspect that you are looking at, right? So this was a simple framework, the 3 slides or 3 sort of a sheets, and which we asked you to deliberate yesterday. So I'm happy that all teams have done wonderful work. So I think we should give a good pat to all of you. So although we had less time, we could get half a day, so to say. But I think it's a sort of a, I mean, I worked on each of your inputs last night. So it came out to be pretty interesting. Of course, whatever I could read and whatever, I mean, of course, I haven't done the detailed analysis because I was half asleep also last night. So it's not so sort of a conscious analysis. But I think it's a good thing to see your sort of each column is filled. So people have thought or at least put something in this, right? So I'm just showing you what you have done. Say the China team has given these perception about Russia, Pakistan, USA, and India, what they will do in this scenario. Then they also have what are their actions along with what are the outcomes that they are expecting, military outcome, economic or geopolitical or any other aspect. So they have given for each of the action, we have asked you to give why you are acting, I mean, why you are going to do this and for what purpose you are doing. So we got this for USA also, for Russia and Pakistan, Bangladesh together, and then India. Okay. So this, of course, we did last night, right? So the next action is to analyze this, right? All 5 teams, we got this. So what we got, your actions that you are going to do and the perception that you have about all the 4, right? This is what we got. So the analysis that I have, which is a sort of a methodology, if you may, that I have created of analyzing this sort of a dynamics, is to organize this as what I call perception action matrix. So perception action matrix is a 5x5 matrix or n by n matrix, where you actually have in the diagonal of this, I mean 5x5 meaning 5 players here and 5 players that side, right? So row as and columns are 5, whatever number of teams. So each team has certain actions that they are going to do, which they have mentioned. And they also have perception about other 4 teams. So in the diagonal elements of this perception action matrix are your actions of each team that you are saying that we are going to take concrete actions on this scenario against or for the actions that others are taking. So these are the concrete actions that you are proposing that you are going to take, right? So each of these diagonal elements, you will see that. But on the row for each of these countries, you will see your perception about what others will do. Okay, so if you read it row by row, you basically say Russia. So the first one will be Russia's actions, right? And the next four sort of columns in this row will be their perception about the other thing. And if you read by column, it is basically saying Russia's action and others' perception about what Russia is going to do, right? Other four teams' perception about what Russia is going to do. So if you actually now compare the difference, the delta between, so column by column, if you sort of analyze, so the Russia's actual actions are in the pink, sort of in the diagonal part, right? The remaining four are the perception about other four about what Russia will do. So you can actually read the column and see Russia did what is there at the top, but others thought they are going to do something, right, which is written there. So there are differences, which is delta, which is not exactly what Russia did, right? But there may be some elements of common elements, but most likely there will be perception differences, perception action differences. Okay. And real play happens in this only because there is a perception of what the others will do and the actions the others do actually are different. They're different, right? And but we do not know what they will do. None of you know what Russia will do, right? It is all your perception. And each team has its own perception of what Russia will do, right? So the real play or real dynamics emerges because the perceptions are varying and every player has different perception about what the other guy will do. So we play this game in our mind, what others will do. So this is one sort of a tool. Yeah. Can you use the mic?
So I have a question, like when you create this matrix, all the information is retained, like whatever inputs were given by the different teams, all the information is retained in creating this matrix, or some information is lost?
All the information that you sent in that.
Yeah, like
in the
different
Excel?
teams have given information and then you have created this matrix.
Yeah, so what I have done from the second and third sheet that you had, which was the actions, which are in the diagonal element, that you put. And only the perception is there in the first sheet is on the each of these. That's all what I just copied that. So what is the question that you had? All the information meaning?
Yeah, because the matrix we created were quite detailed, so there was a lot of information in that. So I was just curious if all of that is retained over here.
All meaning the perception that you had about the first row in the first sheet is there. That is all I just copied.
Okay.
Others, what is the impact on you? Those things are not there.
Okay.
Only what is your perception about what they will do is there. And all your actions, 6, 7 actions that you have written is in the diagonal element. So it sort of covers the action that you are taking and what is your perception about others. So all actions are covered in the diagonal. All 5 teams, whatever action they have taken is in the diagonal element. And what is their perception about others is on the other elements of this matrix. That's why we're calling it perception action matrix. Okay. Now, this is an input for us to sort of look at the picture, right? Picture of the dynamics or the perception and the actual action that you have taken. This is an input for us to sort of analyze based on this, how the game has been positioned in each team's mind. The scenario has become this in your mind, right? That's what we have captured collectively. So that's a sort of a picture of all of us together about what this scenario is saying, right? So this is the tool or the way to capture the perception and potential actions that you are taking. Second second sort of a matrix is which call the expected outcomes and your posture, strategic posture. So you are taking a specific posture, specific stance, specific position against the other four countries, right? Which you are defined in this, right? In the strategic posture part that you are defined what you are going to take, right? Which is there in each of your posture against. So Russia's posture against USA, China, India, Pakistan is in the Russian sheet available, which is what we have captured. And the outcomes that you are expecting. So we have, instead of looking at all the outcomes, which we have anyway looked at the actions, we have looked at how many military outcomes you are looking at, how many economic outcomes, how many geopolitical outcomes, and how many miscellaneous or other outcomes that you're looking. So this gives us a flavor of where is your action going towards, whether you are doing a military solutioning or economic action, or you are focusing on geopolitical or a mix of. So this gives us your focus in the scenario, each team focus in terms of where their mind is, or how they are reading this scenario from the perspective of what they want to change, or which element or which dimension that they are trying to sort of affect. Okay, so that's the second part of the analysis. And of course, their posture against each of these countries also is captured there. Okay, so these two matrices also give us a sort of a view about the sort of a calibration of the scenario along with your intervention together. So each team should look at these two matrices and sort of study how their perception and the other's perception about them and their action and the scenario is different. And is there some similarity also? We are not evaluating the authenticity or the accuracy or the correctness of anything, right? We are not talking about correctness here. Okay, there is nothing right or wrong with this. You got this? There's nothing like this is right or this is wrong. No. It is the way the interpretation has been sort of captured by each team, and we are capturing those interpretations in this and also giving you a picture of the potential dynamics that can emerge in this. Okay, so is that clear? The why of how this has been done. And then we were able to do the events also in terms of how we played the game. And so I've captured whatever I could capture in the WhatsApp is there. Some of this might have been missed also because of the fast, and also maybe messages might be in the wrong sequence, maybe I've captured. But this actually gives us a very interesting sort of a dynamics, because the way we played, had we got more time, we might have sort of used this as an input and could have played a round two, right? I mean, based on these events, we could have created a sort of updated the scenario and could have done the same work again. Okay. So this is what I have shared. Each team has the PPT, this PDF. All of you have, everyone. You guys have the presentation, this presentation. Okay. Anyone has any questions or comments on this? No questions? But okay, at least tell some sort of feedback about what is your understanding or learning in this. Anyone would like to share?
Sir, I just wanted to get an analysis of the event which happened yesterday. Like,
Sorry?
I just wanted a sort of an analysis where analysis or remarks, I would say, from you or any referee, like who would analyze the whole game, that based on this scenario which was given by you, and what could have been the possible outcome.
That's what I'm telling. There is nothing like an outcome in this. Right? It is basically saying that, of course, the outcome that you are proposing and your actions are there. I also don't know if we actually play out those actions that you have written,
Okay.
what will emerge? I don't know. We have to evaluate that, or someone has to do the evaluation, right? So we do not. So to answer to your question is I don't know.
Okay, sir. Thank you
Okay.
so much.
But what we are able to capture through this particular thing is a picture of the possibilities that could be there. Right? The picture of the possibilities that is there in this scenario, and how by inputs from all the 5 teams, how this scenario has changed now. Because there is an element of each one of your input in this element now, and that is where the whatever scenario was there, it has become richer now in information and also perception and inputs from all of you in terms of how you perceive others to be. So that is, I think, the key lesson, not about the specific predictability or specific outcome or specific actions that you are taking. That is not as important as knowing that this is the sort of a evolution of the scenario, and these are the possible paths or forays in which the future can emerge. Okay, so we are not trying to restrict to a sort of a quick snapshot of future. That is not the objective. That is, I mean, that is definitely not the objective of the crisis gaming also. Okay, and that is exactly what I want to share. A crisis game played in 1965 in USA. And in fact, that is, I have shared in the crisis gaming PPT that I've shared, a primer, one more PDF I've shared, right? So I'll just show you that part because that's actually very interesting sort of a case study of crisis gaming. From a book called Crisis Game by Sidney Griffin. There was a crisis game played. It was called Crisis Game Kashmir in, I think, February of 1965. Okay. The scenario in USA. They painted a scenario where Pakistan and China supporting Pakistan will send these forces or these Kabylis, or I mean those people who are not really actual forces but sort of a people who will get into Kashmir and sort of cut off India from Kashmir or rest of the India and through that particular operation. And this scenario, the way the crisis scenario played out in that game, Pakistan won the game, that particular game. And that actually, if you look at the date, months, everything is 66 September they played that. Of course, they looked ahead, 1 year ahead, and they sort of looked at this is what will be the sequence, and this is the losses, and they will be able to cut off Kashmir, and they will take Kashmir along with Chinese support also. That is the scenario played out, and the report was published. Okay, so this was a scenario crisis game which was played out, and actual sort of a report was published, and General Yahya Khan read that report. Okay, in 1965, February, March, April, whatever. So he said, why, if that is anyway going to happen in September 66, why can't we do it in September 65? Well, let us do it. So a perception action, right? So perception of the victory that was there in the game. He said, anyway, we are going to win. So let us do this Operation Gibraltar, I think, whatever he had. So they actually executed 1965 September. That was our second war with India, India-Pakistan war. Lal Bahadur Shastri was our Prime Minister. Yahya Khan thought that this is a prediction. Okay, this is the actual prediction, and this is how we are going to win. Have you heard of Yahya Khan? नहीं सुना? काफी पहले का, आपके पैदा होने से काफी पहले की बात है ना? So Yahya Khan was a military dictator of, or sort of a person who said that they also had this perception that 1962 war, India versus China. So there is, of course, India is weakened, and also newer prime minister seems to be not really powerful because Lal Bahadur Shastri was considered not very strong till that time. Okay, so they sort of considered all these possibilities and created, of course, and also this crisis game came and sort of influenced the war in a way. Can you believe this? Crisis game influenced the war. Okay, Sidney Griffin's book. So let me give you my background with this particular book. I joined DRDO ESA. You met Madam Dipakshi and other scientists from ESA, and I joined them in 1990. And Dr. Jaiswal was our director, whose book we are reading actually in the class. So Dr. Jaiswal, we were doing this, the lab was doing a particular study on what was called India-Pakistan conflict, which was basically trying to apply game theory to the India-Pakistan situation of that time. We had VP Singh as our prime minister at that time. And of course, there was this 89 that Germany was sort of unifying. The Cold War was ending. Russia was breaking, or USSR was breaking. It would become those 13 Commonwealth of Independent States by 1991. So 89 to 91 was the Cold War going off, right? I mean, the world was transforming completely, and we would have 91 Gulf War also. So I joined in 1990, 23rd of March. So the first thing that we did, the first activity or first project that we did was India-Pakistan conflict, which was basically a question about if there is a war between India and Pakistan, what is the possibility that it will be a nuclear war? When will Pakistan use a nuclear bomb? That was the question that we were exploring using the game theory, which we will discuss when we discuss in the class the game theory. Continuing that, from that perspective, we had a visitor from IDSA, Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis, who was K. Subramanian. K. Subramanian actually was the person who created IDSA, Institute for Defense Studies and Analysis. He can be considered as father of India's strategy or whatever. He has written extensively, and his son is our foreign minister now, by the way. So he came to our lab. So we had our discussion on India-Pakistan conflict, right? India-Pakistan situation. And we had this game theoretic business dilemma, sort of a game theoretic framework of what we will do. So he filled up the payoff matrix, and also General Sundarji, who had retired that time, also came for playing this sort of analysis. So in that sort of thing that it emerged, K. Subramaniam mentioned about this book, Sidney Griffin's book. And Dr. Jaiswal said that we would like to have a copy. Obviously, that time the e-books were not there. One single copy was there. So we had to take photocopy or all those things from him. And we took only that Kashmir chapter was photocopied. So that became a very, very important document for the lab because that had only this Kashmir chapter of that particular thing. So K. Subramaniam told us about this particular case, saying that 65, this game actually created a war. Okay. So if you start thinking about crisis games as a prediction, which is what Yahya Khan did in February 65's war, saying that 66 September mein hone wala abhi kar lete hain. Right? And we are anyway going to win. I mean, that's sort of a, so this is the problem of considering all these explorations as predictive. Okay. Obviously, you know, they could not really do anything, I mean, to the extent that they thought they had damaged in 1965. So this is the danger of considering these games and analysis as predictions. Okay, So there are certain advantages, of course, of crisis gaming or these sort of a gaming mechanisms, because most important is to explore the scenarios. So that exercise we haven't done because of the time. So writing a scenario, because that itself is a long sort of a process, and many methods, techniques exist to write scenarios. Okay, exploring multiple dynamics, multiple variables which are interacting. And so in fact, ideally, every nation should have a scenario lab. In my sort of a submission, we should have a geopolitical scenario lab, which should continuously do this scenario exploration, writing multiple scenarios of future and exploring those scenarios continuously. That should be the way we should be exploring the world ahead. But of course, I don't know who does that in which country. Of course, USA, they have these think tanks doing all those sort of things, but it's not a sort of a way in which, say, shell company does. Okay, company, of course, creates the shell. Okay. Second is actual course of play. The first-hand decision making under stress can be an experience by decision maker with penalties for failures. So what we did yesterday, you did something, right? So there is no penalty for failure. So you didn't get any penalty or minus score, plus score. We haven't done any scoring in this, right? But you can. You can associate certain penalties and certain scoring mechanism when you are going to design them. And finally, since it is free form, rules are minimum in crisis game, free form, right? There are not many rules that we had. Although I have given you a template to think about, I could have not, I mean, there was no need for me to give this template. That I could have given you a scenario and told you, okay, aap socho, right? But template was required because aap socho will be, I think, specifically becomes a little too vague, especially in a classroom scenario, because the audience or all of us are not as experienced as maybe people who might have sort of looked at that, right? So, but it gives you this creative forays, imagination, using your creativity or imagination collectively to study, discuss, and maybe come out with some sort of a courses which may be interesting, a new one. So in those matrices, in those Excels, maybe some sort of a future solution might be there yesterday that we have created, which may be very interesting or creative. Okay. So really, why we are doing it? Anyone? I mean, do we need to do this? You think it is required, this sort of a crisis game? Why? Why do we need to do? Sorry.
This gives us sort of an idea that what will be the real life means real war like scenario would be. And for example, during the Second World War, okay, I think UK or Germany, no, UK or US did so many war games that they said that there will be no scenario that we haven't practiced. It was other case where Japan used that kamikaze drones, matlab kamikaze planes, but except for that, they practiced so many scenarios that they were so confident that they would be able to like handle any situation.
You're saying Pearl Harbor was not predicted, right? That's what you're saying.
Yeah, that Pearl Harbor as well as that use of kamikaze planes.
Kamikaze.
So that was not predicted. Otherwise, means other than that, they were fully confident that under any scenario or any situation, they would be able to handle any crisis.
So I mean, the question was, should we do this crisis gaming?
Yes, sir.
So you're saying because they did all the scenarios, despite that they missed. So is that an answer to the question, or saying that we should
No,
not?
no, actually, sir, this gives us an idea that what will be the means what we can do or what we can simulate, I would say.
तो लाइक सर अगर इन्होंने वो वाली भी वॉर प्लानिंग पहले नहीं की होती तो पॉसिबली पहले ही वो मात खा गए होते वॉर में
कौन?
यूएसए एंड यूके दैट ही
प्लानिंग
टॉकिंग अबाउट
प्लानिंग ये प्लानिंग का पार्ट कर रहे हैं आप, ये प्लानिंग है।
जो वॉर गेमिंग जो उन्होंने की दैट इज व्हाट लेड देम टू जितने भी लेवल तक वो पहुंचे थे राइट इट्स पॉसिबल कि समथिंग व्हिच इज आउट ऑफ बॉक्स दैट हैपेंस तो जरूरी नहीं है कि हर चीज ही आप प्रैक्टिस कर चुके हो एक बार बट एटलीस्ट जितना किया उसके बिहाफ पे वो एक लेवल तक तो पहुंच ही पाए वॉर में.
Sir, sir, it helps to impart a strategic thought.
Strategic thought, matlab,
Sir, the ability to think in the future, like if we have, based on our national values, we form our national objectives. Now, to how to achieve those goals, for that we need to think strategically. And to have that strategic thought, we need to first understand that how things happens, because in this game we get to know that our actions are not solely dependent on our actions, but also the other people who are that. We are not the sole agency in this game, so it helps us manage that. If some unknown crisis happens, so how to deal with that, like if we want to grow economically but a war is imposed on us, so that is a crisis situation. And if we try to simulate such situations, we'll get a basic idea to how to face anything such like that, because we don't know what will happen next, but at least we can try to be prepared. So it's a good thing.
it's a good, तो
Good
आप
thing.
certify करते हो इसको,
Yes, sir.
certification good है,
Yes, sir. बढ़िया है.
इससे अच्छा नहीं हो सकता.
Sir,
We can measure the damages that
Mic up on.
so we can measure the damages that can be done to us. So we can
Measure the damages.
damages done to us, so we can avoid that.
So
Casual.
basically what could be the impact on us, right? I mean,
Yes,
that's
sir.
what. Okay, so obviously it offers the decision makers or decision making processes that will be impacted by variety of factors. Of course, so that's visibility is there, that you cannot have a decision in terms of or action based on what you are thinking alone. You need to consider the enemy. So enemy also has to be in the on the table. That when you are thinking, you have to consider that, along with, of course, the scenario situation that is there. And then the third part is expected outcome. What exactly you want to change, right? If you do not want to change anything, then fine, then there is no need. But if you want to change something, if you do not act, the world is going to be in a sort of a situation which is not what you want. So you have to do something. That is the crisis situation, right? So what you do not want, if it is going to be disaster for you, and disaster is loss of something very, very valuable, right? We define disaster. Disaster is something when you lose something extremely valuable, especially human lives, right? That is what is our sort of a, and the crisis is a situation which can lead to disaster quickly, okay? Or if you do not intervene, it will be a disaster. So that is a crisis situation. So risk is how many possible crisis situations can emerge in a particular scenario, particular situation. What is the uncertainty and what is the impact in terms of disaster? That's it, right? So the sort of a key point is that this can give you a glimpse of what are those drivers, what are those aspects that are there. And also under stress. When you are under stress, your decision making will be impacted not by very sort of a mathematical precision or objectivity. You will be driven by multiple emotional inputs, multiple triggers that may be there. How to keep your rationality on at that time is extremely difficult, right? So that's one sort of a point. Yeah.
Sir, the same point, sir, it's not just about a war. It's about your daily life choices and daily life decisions also. Emotions can affect your decisions. Too much stress, it can affect your decisions.
So
Thinking.
yeah, one point could be कि अगर हम इमोशनली डिसीजन ना लें, अपनी जिंदगी इमोशन के साथ ना जिए, तो हम तो रोबोट हो जाएंगे फिर तो इमोशंस तो इनहेरेंटली चाहिए इमोशनली तभी कनेक्ट हो गए आप, राइट? बट हैविंग सेड दैट, रैशनैलिटी हैज टू बी बैलेंस्ड विद दिस सॉर्ट ऑफ इमोशनल आस्पेक्ट. So there are limitations of this whole exploring thing also. And that is where we need to be very, very careful when you are using this methodology, okay, or this sort of a framework for analyzing. So please understand, as I gave the example of Yahya Khan, it is doesn't have any predictive value. Do not associate any prediction that this is the future predicted by this scenario game or by any scenario, okay? So no predictive value is what we are saying. First point, do not consider it as a prediction. Second is gaming can be worse than nothing at all because the wrong lessons are learned. I mean, this is tying to the first one also, prediction, and also the sort of a determinism inherent in this sort of a flow. And we sort of give this a certainty which it doesn't have. And that is a grave danger. When you sort of say that हमने ये किया था, ऐसे हुआ है, ऐसे ही होगा, और इसलिए अब हमको यही करना है, right? That sort of a predictive determinism is extremely dangerous. Okay. Third one is lessons learned from the game may be refined into crisis formulae. Yesterday what we did, if it becomes a formula, meaning अब ये तो ऐसे ही होगा जी, ये फिक्स हो गया, अब हमको ऐसे ही करना है, that is also a danger because that is not really the purpose of this. There is no algorithm we are sort of creating in this, right? So it's calling it ये फॉर्मूला बन गया, अब ये करना है, जैसे यहिया खान ने किया, अब ऐसे ही ऑपरेशन जिब्राल्टर करना है क्योंकि यूएस ने बताया हमको गेम में, तो हमको वही करना है, ऐसे ही करना है. रेप्लिकेशन ऑफ रिजल्ट्स इज वेरी डिफिकल्ट. यदि हम ये कल आप लोगों के साथ अगेन खेलते हैं सेम गेम, अलग आएगा रिजल्ट, राइट? रेप्लिकेटिंग दीज रिजल्ट्स or whatever, you know, of course in this case you already have played, so there is already perception. But supposing I give a completely new scenario to a set of people here and maybe a sort of a control set somewhere, it will be different. Okay. The variables of the game, size, time frame, level of stress must be deliberately varied. So there has to be deliberation. Deliberately you need to sort of create the temperature of the game. So this was sort of a high temperature game scenario that I painted, which was sort of to give you the feeling of sort of a stress or feeling of these constraints that we have. Okay. Question of realism must be addressed. It is difficult to duplicate fully the stakes, stress and fatigue of a real crisis. So obviously, this can never be a sort of a substitute for real crisis. आपको ये कहा जाए कि अब ये सीख लिया, अब आपने आप कभी भी हैंडल कर सकते हो, नहीं ऑब्वियस. But this is definitely input for us. You're training your mind, and as I think yesterday Dipakshi said, mental model, some sort of a training your mental models of framework of looking at what could happen and what should we respond or how we should respond, I think is a good sort of aim. And finally, the question about the rigid game. You might have some agenda upfront saying कि हमको यही बताना है, यही करना है, and then से लोग मान नहीं रहे हैं, people, उनको कैसे इन्फ्लुएंस किया जाए. तो ऐसा गेम बनाया जाए कि जिसमें निकले यही रिजल्ट निकलेगा जो हमको निकालना है. उनको कहो कि आपने निकाला गेम में से, और फिर कहो कि आपने तो किया ये तो, राइट? In fact, there was a story, नौशेरवान आदिल, I think ईरान का शायद वो किंग था या कहीं का, तो he used to ask कि भाई आपके 10 पॉइंट्स सबको पूछता था, important 10 पॉइंट्स फॉर फ्यूचर ऑफ आवर कंट्री बताइए. सब लोग लिख के दो, कागज में लिख के या कैसे भी लिख के एक डब्बे में डाल दो. 10 important points for future what we should be doing. ओके, वो डब्बे में डाल दो, तो फिर वो कहेंगे सबके डब्बे अपने डब्बे में डाल दिए 10-10 पॉइंट्स. तो लास्ट में इस महीने के बाद सब वो 10 पॉइंट्स इकट्ठे किए, सारे 10 कितने 100 पॉइंट्स हो गए होंगे, उनमें से 10 पॉइंट बताए गए. ये अब लॉ बन गया है. दिस इज व्हाट वी आर गोइंग टू फॉलो बेस्ड ऑन द डेमोक्रेटिकली. आप लोगों के 10 पॉइंट्स आए हैं सबके. अब वो हर बंदा कहेगा मेरा 1 पॉइंट है, मेरा 2 पॉइंट है, मेरा 3 पॉइंट है. तो किसी के 10 पॉइंट नहीं थे, बट एक्चुअली जो 10 के 10 पॉइंट थे उसके खुद के थे. राइट, उसने जो लिखे वही किए, पर पूछा सबसे कि आप दो अपने अपने पॉइंट्स, वो फेंक दिए 10 के 10 सब पॉइंट्स। बट ये जरूर है कि हमने ये कहा कि आप लोगों से पूछा, तो लोगों को ये चाहिए कि हाँ हमसे पूछा तो गया ना, हमारा एक पॉइंट आया, आधा पॉइंट आया, नहीं भी आया, लेकिन हमसे पूछा तो गया। एंड दैट इज द वे द rigid games can come. If you have the agenda upfront, just to sort of politically saying कि हमको ये politically sell करना है, और इसको करने के लिए we have to show that this is what we should do, so rigidness should not be there. Okay, last point about the game is the scenario writing. So scenario writing is a skill, is an art, and also there is a whole lot of literature and methods which have been published in future study. And of course, as I said, it started with Rand Corporation in 1949 after when it was established. But Shell Company took it and created this long-term futures. So there is a huge sort of a literature and methods, and multiple places scenarios are being used and being written. So if you learn to explore and write scenario planning or scenario writing, you potentially have a role in some of these big companies as a strategic sort of advisor. You can actually tell them to create their corporate strategy using scenario planning if you learn this. Okay, so that's what I've been saying from the very beginning. Our WSS course has variety of these techniques and methods that are applicable across. So not only in warfare. So some people were saying कि यार ये WSS हम कर लेते हैं, इसका स्कोप क्या है? इसका तो स्कोप ये है कि अगर सीखोगे तो कहीं भी अप्लाई हो सकता है। ये methods, techniques are applicable everywhere. So scenario writing, as I said, Shell company and lot of big companies are actually doing, and believe me, they don't know how to do it. So उनको चाहिए कोई कैसे सिनेरियो लिखते हैं। तो इसलिए सिनेरियो, इफ यू स्टडी हाउ टू अंडरस्टैंड सिनेरियो, हाउ टू राइट सिनेरियो, हाउ टू अंडरस्टैंड दिस कॉम्प्लेक्स sort of variables and how they interact and from which you create narratives, this can be great skill. Okay, so I'm just giving you a sort of a definition of scenarios here. What it should be, it should not be, it should be future oriented, should not be nowcast, meaning जो अभी होगा उसी को नहीं डालने का है कि उसको दिखा दिया सिनेरियो हो गया. It has to be future oriented. Second is it should have some sort of a external context. Should not be जो हमारे जो CEO ने बोला वही बोल दिया, उसी को ही कर दिया, वो नहीं. It should have a narrative description. Description होनी चाहिए कि ये होगा, ये इवेंट्स होंगे, इस तरह के लोग होंगे, इस तरह का इंटरेक्शन होगा, उसका इम्पैक्ट होगा. ये ऐसे एक स्टोरी टाइप का होना. प्लॉजिबली पॉसिबल, ये नहीं है कि पक्का यही होना है टाइप का, राइट. प्लॉजिबिलिटी एस्पेक्ट का इस व्हाट वी आर लुकिंग. हो सकता है, राइट, हमारा सिनेरियो हो सकता है, होगा नहीं होगा, कितना होगा वी डोंट नो. हो सकता तो है, आज भी होगा, 10 साल के अंदर हो सकता. A systematized set. So this means that multiple scenarios needs to be written, which we didn't write here. We picked up one scenario, but ideally there should be 3 to 5 scenarios related to multiple aspects with variations. Okay, and comparatively different, so that the set of scenarios that you have, 3 to 5 scenarios, they should be, you should be categorically should be able to say ये इससे अलग है, ये इससे अलग है, ये इससे. Okay. So there is these techniques called general morphological analysis for writing scenarios, which of course we are not doing, although we could have included the GMA. I have a sort of a tool that is there in that we use for sort of teaching futures. Only thing is that we'll see in the class, if we can have time, we'll use that. So this is more or less about the crisis gaming. So this, I think, is what we wanted to share. I have shared the presentations on a primer on crisis gaming, along with all those aspects of that, plus what we have done yesterday, the whole game. So this is where just wanted to share at this one-day workshop, which was reduced to 75% of the day. because yesterday half day we had inauguration only. Okay. So shall we take a small break and then come back for the second workshop? Okay. So how much time? 10 मिनट. हेलो, आप लोग यहीं पे हो या मैं अकेला ही बोल रहा हूँ? हाँ, कितने देर में? आप तो अभी अभी आए हो, अभी आते ही ब्रेक. तो 10 मिनट. Okay, now we start the second part. This is actually so the 5 teams were there, right? Yeah. So maybe if you have about 15 students here, अपनी क्लास में 15 है ना? 15 plus other students also wants to join us. So approximately 3 teams will be okay. Okay. Sir. So this is actually more of thinking about designing or inventing a new system or a new capability or a new weapon system, if you may, or even a new operation. Okay. So I'm going to explain a little bit about what is the difference between operation, operational level, and also give you a process of how we can go about it. Okay. So first we need to form the teams. Are we okay with the teams that we have? We continue to have the 5 teams as it is, or we refactor it? ये आप सोच लीजिए. Same 5 teams that we have, we continue. Okay. So first I will explain a little bit about what the question is and also give you a process. I'm also going to share with you a small case study, and also at the end of this particular session or particular exercise, we expect some sort of ideas from each team. Okay. So I'll just give you the expectation. Ideas should be about some sort of a solution to a problem. Okay. To a problem, has to be some sort of a problem related to the military aspect or related to the safety, security, defense of something. Okay. And we are going to define the problem today. Each team is going to define the problem. Each team is also going to ideate, generate ideas on that problem, and convert those ideas into solutions to that problem that you are going to define. So there are two aspects of this. First, I'm going to explain how to define or write a problem and also convert it into solutions. Okay. And then evaluate the solutions using a method that we call a sort of a strategic prioritization map using AHP, which we have studied, right? Analytic hierarchy process. So I'm also going to give you an Excel sheet, which at the end, each team has to sort of fill, will create some sort of a prioritization based on certain criteria. Okay. So this is different from yesterday's crisis game. This is actually inventing some sort of inventing or designing a solution, okay, to a problem. That problem also you have to sort of define, okay. And this is actually our assignment 6 in our theory class, okay. So at the end, you can claim this to be assignment 6, right? So we are at assignment 3. Some of you are doing assignment 4. Assignment 5 will be designing a computerized or a sort of a war game, which at some level of detail. I'm going to explain what are these military levels also, okay? So there are two main levels that Clausewitz, who is sort of a father of modern military strategy, so to say, or theory. So military theory, I mean, during the Napoleon's time or, I mean, that time, he is followed. He wrote that on war. There's a book or series of books, volume 1 to 3, which is actually, people say that it was written by his wife, I think, rather than him, but at least that book is there. So that is sort of followed across the world as the theoretical basis. So he defines war as well as variety of aspects, and he defines two main levels of war. Okay. So that is strategy and tactics. Okay. So as the complexity of warfare substantially increased, specifically after Industrial Revolution in a particular way, there came a sort of an intermediate level or intermediate aspect of converting the strategic requirements into tactical sort of a options or tactical way in which the actual battle actually can be designed. So that part, intermediate part between strategy and tactical level, the two levels that Clausewitz had, it was considered by Soviet Union as operational art. That operational art of operations you can call, or operational art. Unfortunately, that sort of later on, somehow Western world, specifically US big strategic thinkers, they converted it into a level. So they started calling it operational level. Now, specifically after 20 years of their big failure in Afghanistan and Iraq from 2001 to 2021, people are actually saying that was the biggest mistake that they did, because they started calling it operational level, strategy and tactics linkages was lost. So operational level means some people who are going to define the operational level supposedly convert the strategic level into certain artifacts or certain objectives, which will be given to the tactical level, was the sort of a idea. So intermediate something emerged. That is one school of thought. That is not a good thing. Second school of thought is saying that, yes, that level should be there. Yeah. We have also meeting? Yeah, I know. So I'm giving you two school of thought and also giving you a little bit about the aspect of whether you want to call it a level or a operational art. But the set of activities exist. Set of activities which are designing a campaign or a operation. So when Putin launched after that Winter Olympics, that operation, he called it Special Military Operation, SMO, against Ukraine, right? On 24th of February 2022. It was called a special military operation, not a war, not an attack, right? So what is that operation? So word operation came from Soviet Union, specifically in 1920s, after the so-called communism came, and they sort of created a new way of looking at military organization. And there is, of course, history saying that because of the communist people, there was a political intervention. So military people wanted to sort of tell these communist people or communist overlords to be away from the military things. So they said, okay, you take care of the strategy, and military things, whenever comes, we will take care. So you talk only the ideology, communism, whatever, you take it. But as soon as the military aspect comes, we will take over. And that political thing sort of created a new level. So they called it actually operational art, but it became a level. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. That's right. That's right. Because that is how they need to control politically these guys, right? I mean, there's a political control. That's right. So you might have seen that movie Hunt for Red October. Sean Connery actually playing that Captain Tom Clancy's novel. In fact, I would request you actually to read the novel, then of course watch the movie also. Have you seen? How many of you have seen Hunt for Red October? Only two. Okay, Tom Clancy's novel, I think, also is very good. You should read. So what we are going to sort of look at here is a little bit about description about these levels of war, strategy, tactical level, and whether you want to follow the operational level or calling it operational art is, I think we can sort of let it go. But we are going to sort of look at the operational level, define what do we mean by that, and what are the key methodological aspects that people have to sort of explore that is what we are going to sort of look at. And then the aspect of technologies, right, which is what we are trying to sort of understand. So as we have been saying from the very beginning, we are in the so-called creative destruction. And I think yesterday economic prize Nobel laureate got for creative destruction, right? They announced that economic prize, economic Nobel for I think it is given for creative destruction. This sort of economic analysis of creative destruction is actually what they have said. So I've been talking about this creative destruction phase that we are going through, which is what we call the sixth wave of innovation, which we have discussed in the class also earlier, right? We actually started the first lecture with creative destruction. And yesterday, day before yesterday, economic prize, economic Nobel has been announced. It is actually for creative destruction economic models developed by those people. Okay, so it means that we are on the right track, or maybe they are on the right track anyway. So that perspective is that we are in a new era where there are new technologies, new ways of technological capabilities which are emerging or have emerged, are now going to create newer ways of economic value creation, thereby destroying the previous ways of economic value creation. And that is where the destruction part will simultaneously continue as the creation continues. So it is going to be a sort of a phase which will be in turbulence. Creative part and the destruction, which we actually are going through. Very similar phase was in late 1980s and early 90s, where we had the demise of USSR, demise of Cold War, and 1991 Gulf War. And by 1994, we have World Wide Web, internet. Okay, so the transformation of through technologies of the economic system as well as, of course, the world system happens regularly after a few decades. That's what the sixth wave of innovation or the waves of innovation theory talks about, which we discussed in class 1. Of course, I don't know whether you remember or not. So we are going to look at what are the new technologies, which I think you guys have some idea. And then we are going to sort of say, looking at the operational art, looking at the newer technologies, can we invent a sort of a new systems or new ways of doing the military objectives or solving a military problem in the context that we can study? Okay, so that is where your imagination, your ability to come up with ideas, or what we call creative problem solving or inventive problem solving, will be our focus. Okay, so before we get to this problem, we clarify the definitions. Okay, the definition, as I said, and this is from a thesis by, I think, Norway or some particular European country, which has done this very nice thesis is there, written by one of the students, very, very interesting researchers. So I'm going to share this thesis also in our book, but right now we need to look at the definitions. Okay, so as I said, the so-called strategic and tactical level is classical, coming from Clausewitz, and the linkages between them is established. And militaries have been designed to follow strategic inputs of the commander through what is called the 5 paragraphs of war, which is basically situation assessment, which has 5 elements which are described in the way command flows from the top to the next level, to the next level, to the next level, to the bottom, to the least person who actually is firing. He gets that command. So commander's intent goes to the soldier or the firer, and the will of the commander actually is established flows through these 5 levels of war, 5 paragraphs of war, through this command flow. Okay. Interestingly, these 5 paragraphs of war, which actually follow sort of a systematically in a hierarchy or in a pyramid, has been established around, I think, late 1800s, and they have continued to remain same. So 5 levels of war has not changed. Okay, we'll talk about that in maybe second part. But let us look at the definition of these 3 levels, specifically strategic level and tactical level, and then the attempt to incorporate this operational level also we'll discuss. Okay, so first is what we call, okay, we'll come to the term this operational planning operations later. First, we look at these levels. So strategic level is closer to political sort of a reason for war. So if you remember, we sort of said what is warfare is organized violence for political gains, political objectives. That's what Clausewitzian sort of a theory talks about. And organizing violence, of course, is the key. How do we organize violence in a structured, systematic manner so that it achieves the political objectives that our sort of owner of the nation or the chosen representative of the nation actually have to tell? Okay. Why they have to tell? Because, you know, we have these 4 elements of a nation: sovereignty, government, territory, and people, right? So if any of these are threatened or potentially can be threatened, we have a requirement of sort of organizing violence for resorting to or fighting against that threat. Or if we want to have some sort of a objective of expanding our national boundaries or some other aspects may be there, for which we may have to use organized violence, or which is called using force. So if you have more ability to enable or disable others' options in doing something, you have power, right? You have power when you use force to enable or disable someone's actions, and you can do that if you force them not to do or to do something which they do not want to do. Then you have power, right? If they do not want to do anything, you have no power on that. So Alexander the Great, when he came, he met one Naga sadhu. You know, sadhu. So he became very, this thing that is a very good person. He said, why don't you join me to that Alexander? सिकंदर ने उससे कहा कि आप हमें ज्वाइन कीजिए. वो साधु जी कहते हैं कि आप पागल हो, क्या घूम रहे हो यहाँ, कहाँ से आ गए हो, अपने घर जाओ. मुझे जितनी जमीन चाहिए, जितना पानी चाहिए, मुझे पास है. आप मुझे कुछ नहीं दे सकते, राइट? मुझे कुछ चाहिए ही नहीं, तो आप क्या दे सकते हो मुझे? If you do not need anything, right? If you do not value anything, you are the most powerful. And that is Indian philosophy. Western philosophy is, we need everything, then I become powerful. Indian philosophy is, how do you get powerful? By needing nothing. When you have nothing, you are the most powerful, right? Why? Sorry? Nothing to, because you don't need anything. When you do not want anything, because what you need has given by you, by the nature, and nature will take care of you. That is our philosophy. And these sadhus are basically best saying that we are most powerful. Why they are powerful? Because they say we don't need anything. Western world says, how do you get power? By amassing more and more. Materialistic as well as more resources, more capabilities to influence others, right? And that is the whole problem of conflict. Because power comes because you will be able to gain something valuable, that something that others value, right? That if you are able to take that, then you are powerful against that particular. Supposing he says you take it, I'm not interested. Whatever you have, whatever you think I have, you take it. Then what power you have on them, right? So that is the one part of that. So the political aspect comes from value and power, that power and force, and it comes from what you value. And in the definition of a nation state, there are 4 key elements of value, which are people of that particular state, territory, sovereignty, and governance. Sovereignty is independence of taking actions or these sort of decisions on your own without having any force imposed on you. Okay. So when that political objectives are clear, that are communicated to the commanders or the people who will formulate certain action plans of achieving that particular political requirement or political objectives of the political leaders or political system that you may be having, which is the government system of the nation. Okay. That level at which a nation or a group of nations determine national or multinational security objectives and develop those resources, including military resources and economic resources and technological resources, or military industrial bases or factories or whatever, all those sort of things are at that level. Strategic level, as per this definition, is much more broad. Okay, much more broad. And the tactical level is when you actually start engaging with the enemy at level at which activities, battles, and engagements are planned and executed to accomplish military objectives assigned to tactical formations and units. What are tactical formations? They actually fight the enemy. They actually do the fighting. Doing the fight, doing the actual engagement is tactical. Okay. And you need to plan to do that also. You need to have certain operations to be designed for tactical level also. Okay. So we'll come to the operational level, which is a new definition. But before that, there is a generic definition of what is an operation and what is ops planning or operations planning. Operation in general is a action or a military action for carrying out, and here it is at any level, strategic, tactical, service, training, or administrative military mission. The mission comes from the objectives that you have, which you want to achieve, and that is defined, and what are the steps that you are going to take to carry out that particular mission, which will achieve an outcome or a output or a sort of a sort of a behavior change in the other is what we are trying to figure out, right? So the process of carrying on combat, including movement, supply, attack, defense, maneuvers, for gaining the objective of any battle or campaign. So this is not really related to any of those strategic level, tactical level, or any other level. So we are not talking about level here. The word operations is a set of activities required to achieve a mission. Okay, that we call operation. Then planning to do an operation is called operations planning. Right? The planning of military operations, now here it can be at any level. Right? Ops planning can be at the strategic level, can be at the tactical level, and I will explain this operational level also. So here is little bit of a sort of a term that is also, as English people get into this sort of a problem. Operations planning. So the preferred English term to designate the planning of military operations at that levels is operations planning. The term operational level planning is not used because there is an operational level. It's not to be used so as to prevent the confusion with operations planning. So the word is operations planning when we're talking about designing an operation. Okay. Now this can be at any level, as I said in the initial sort of a thing, can be grand strategy operation also, can be strategy operation, can be operational level operation, can be tactical level operation. Any level is up to you to choose, right, as part of this exercise. Okay. Now come to the problem of the definition problem, which is the operational level. This term has become in vogue, although lot of people are, there is a school of thought which sort of doesn't want this to be a level. But there is a school of thought, or in fact, it is already embedded in the parlance that there are 3 levels of war, which is tactical, operational, and strategic. So that school of thought says that there is a level. Okay. Now the problem is, I mean, as I said, we learned this in 2001 to 2021 in US operations against Afghanistan and Iraq, that this creates a problem of disconnect between strategy and tactics. And that is where, instead of creating a set of people or set of sort of a organization structure, which is operational level, we should not really call it a level. Okay. But if we follow that first school, which is actually saying it's a level, so this is a level at which campaigns and major operations are planned, conducted, and sustained to accomplish strategic objectives within theaters or areas of operation. Okay. So from our perspective, you can look at whether you want to sort of come out with a tactical level, operational level, or a strategic level, or at the policy level. But you need to come out with a problem at whatever level that you have. It comes out in your scenario, and also come out with ideas and solutions to that sort of a problem. That's the activity that we have to do. But wanted to clarify the meaning of the word operations, and do not really confuse with, we are talking about operational level. You got this? We're not talking about operational level. Yeah, we're talking about coming up or inventing a military operation. Design or invent a military operation at the operational level, or at the tactical level, or at the strategic level is up to you. Is it clear? This is very important because people got confused earlier when we did this workshop. Some people have heard this operational level, strategic level, tactical level. So there was a debate that we had initially. So we basically wanted to clarify this. So now coming to methodology. So there are 7 steps to this exercise, which we have done for last 4 years in multiple organizations as part of our course. And just like some people said yesterday, there are 2 aspects of this whole exercise. What is the most important aspect? You have to enjoy this. Okay, if you do not enjoy it, then you will not learn. Second is you have to invent. And with your imagination open to really invent with pure ideation about what we can think about. We are not going to evaluate upfront. Evaluation we'll do later on in the second phase or the third step. I think maybe it is at the fourth step, right? Where we'll use AHP. But the first three steps is all about your imagination. Collective imagination and ideation is what we're looking at. You got that? So basically, this workshop gives you whatever your creative imagination could be. Okay? First three steps, you do that. About, so you have studied for 3 years or whatever, 4 years, this defense analysis. So you must be having some thoughts already or some points about ऐसे क्यों नहीं करते, ऐसे क्यों लेते, ऐसे भी होना चाहिए, right? या क्यों नहीं ये करना चाहिए, जो भी आपके दिमाग में आता है वो अब आपको आज आपके पास ऑप्शन है लिखने का. तो पहला क्या पॉइंट है, सबसे स्टेप 1 is pick up a relevant trend. Could be a trend, right? That is emerging ahead, or any one of a combination as we have written, or anything else. So for example, this may be little old, but let us see what we have. I mean, old meaning last 3-4 years only. So because things are changing so fast that this has to be updated, I think every 3 months, this whole write-up. So possible threat from an adversary, as is indicated in Chinese evolutionary threat maybe. Technological changes to the warfare. We talked about the 6th wave of innovation technologies, Internet of Things, autonomous systems, robotic warfare, algorithmic warfare, mosaic warfare, AI, quantum technologies, anything. जो भी आपको लगता है, interest भी आता है, but these are the things that are changing, that are being used or considered to be used for designing some sort of a solution to the military problem. Okay. Third is, could be a new war, right? Like last 3 years, we are having this Ukraine-Russia war, or even the Hamas versus Israel, or our Operation Sindoor with whatever information we could get, or any other operation that you would like to have, say Azerbaijan, Armenia situation, or anything else. I mean, anything that you have in available. New war below the threshold of conventional war. It could be these 4 domains that we have: cognitive, physical, informational, as well as the life, right? Living domain, biology, life, right? So all these 4 domains are available. And I mean, I call these 4 domains, whereas the US says 5 domains, which are land, air, marine, or the sea, plus cyber and space, right? Which is what they call domain, which is actually a very confusing definition of a domain, because these are part of, earlier they used to call it dimensions actually. So dimensions is a better word, because dimension is the direction in which you are looking, right? Mathematically, what is a dimension? You have this x, y, z dimension. What are those dimensions? Your coordinate system of looking at in this direction. जब आप x direction में देख रहे हैं, तो उसको direction of seeing is a dimension. मैं इस dimension में देख रहा हूँ, मैं उस dimension में देख रहा हूँ, मैं इधर देख रहा हूँ, right? ये देखना है, right? So that is a dimension. You can have WMD dimension, weapons of mass destruction dimension. You could have a space dimension. You could have also. So dimensions are a better term, which they are used to use earlier, but they have somehow got into this space, cyber, land, air, and also sea or water, right? So these 5 domains. So the problem is, what do you call information now? Is information a domain or a dimension? Because information is in space, in land, also in cyber, in sea, everywhere. But if you call it a dimension, you have a better option. Oh, no, sorry. If you call it a domain, so only 4 domains: information domain, cognitive, which is a mental model of that, and physical and life will be better option. But having said that, I mean, I'm not getting into that debate, I mean, of whatever you want to call. But what we are looking at is ability to organize destruction and violence in any of these dimensions or domains, whatever you want. Okay, so that is what we are saying, right? It could be cyberspace. How do you do? So there was this Stuxnet worm, right? that which actually created that Iranian centrifugal uh, centrifuges, which destroyed the nuclear centrifuges in 2007, 2009 by a virus, a computer virus that was sort of incorporated in the nuclear plant in sort of Tehran, right? Have you heard of Stuxnet? STUXNA2. Stuxnet was a computer worm, the first cyber worm that has a kinetic effect. That is the first kinetic weapon, which actually was a kinetic weapon, meaning physical impact, physically destroyed, but it was a cyber weapon. That was the first weapon, which was a cyber war sort of was used. After that, now potentially many weapons are possible. Okay. So, I mean, whether you want to come out with something like that, it's up to you. Okay. So you can also pick up some old warfare scenarios in your research, say Kargil or Operation Parakram or any other that you have in your history or whatever is of your interest. In fact, you can also consider we had this 1971 Karachi attack. So I think the information is in one night, Indian Navy destroyed 25% of Pakistan Navy. One night by those OSA missiles. I mean, the OSA was the boats, Styx missiles that was fired. And the 3 warships were destroyed. And also the port completely destroyed. So 25% of the Navy was destroyed, Pakistan Navy, in one night. Okay, so can we do it now? 25% kitna hoga abhi? So that's, I think Commander Sharma will be able to. So, I mean, what I'm saying is you can pick up any of these operations for your thinking. Okay, you can also consider this new sort of a organization, say, so I think the fertile ground for us is to look at China. Since Xi Jinping came 2013, 2012, and specifically after 2015 white paper on defense, which actually shifted the focus to a much bigger PLA, also shifted the focus from army type of PLA to navy type of PLA to air force type of PLA to rocket forces type of PLA, plus all these sort of a structure which they called strategic support force, SSF. That SSF was actually a innovation in 2015 when it was created. It basically incorporated all these cyber weapons, IT type of organizations, or space organizations, or the network organizations that they had into a single support force. SSF it was called, Strategic Support Force. So it was considered by Western media also that it's a great innovation of China. Last year in April, they disbanded it. Right. So that was considered as a great force, great innovation. Last year, they disbanded it into, but why they disbanded? Because centralizing all the support forces created a command control issue. Because every theater will have to talk to that central force, and that guy became so powerful. कहता मैं नहीं देता आपको, आपके मेरे पास इतना सारा है, मैं क्यों दूँ आपको, मैं तो उधर busy हूँ, right? So that guy became sort of so he was sort of course there is a political reason also that head of that SSF was removed. Of course, there may be some other reasons also. And now we have these 4 parts. So aerospace forces, aerospace support forces, and 3 more are there. Logistics also. And so now they are actually having elements of each theater commands that they created in 2015. So China shifted from military region system, which was the earlier system, the PLA, into these theater commands. So India, of course, comes with this so-called Western command that they have. Okay, so this is where when you can pick up that. Or in our scenario of our change to tri-services theater command, as I think Madam Dipakshi also mentioned in her address, saying that theater commands is a sort of a, I mean, from the single service commands that we had, we are shifting towards or trying to shift towards this so-called tri-services commands. Or in fact, I think Isa mentioned about Varun will tell actually the tri-services game that they are developing, right? So, I mean, there are a lot of these things. So maybe this can be opportunity for sort of some of you to explore that, okay? So this is step one. You sort of study something, either the trends or a military operation or a structural change or something that has changed today. Okay, pick up that as sort of your arena in which you are going to invent. Second is from the chosen trends from step one, find out the key problems that India should address. Problems, so what is a problem? And that's actually very difficult problem is to define a problem. We have this problem of not able to define problems. Okay, what are problems? Problems are those hindrances, right? Those stoppages that doesn't really allow you to fulfill the needs or capture certain opportunities that you may be looking at. So what is stopping you is a problem. But stopping you to do what? So to do what is has to be defined, right? Once you have to do what I want to do this, that part has to come. That will come from your objectives. What is your mission? What is your objective? What is your operation that you want to design? Once you have that, then what is stopping you to achieve is the problem. Okay. So if you remove the hindrance or you find out means to remove that hindrance, which is stopping you to achieve that particular objective, you will solve the problem. Okay. And if that solution to the problem, if that solution to the problem is new in the world, novel, right, and also non-obvious, then it's called an invention as per patent law. The patent law, patents, you know, the inventions are given the patents. So as per that, a technical solution to a problem, if it is novel in the world, no one else has thought about it, and is non-obvious, that means it has something called an inventive step, then it is a patentable idea. Okay. So potential today is that each one of you in the evening may have a patentable idea. That's the potential of this particular workshop. Because we are giving you to think and imagine and solve a real problem that actually you will define from the operations that you are going to study. Third point is, once you have defined the problem, now you need to generate solutions. How to generate ideas? So all of you know how to generate ideas? Ideas कितने आते हैं आपको रोज के? सुबह शाम, अरे हमें तो पसीना आता है, बस आइडियाज तो आते नहीं। कितने आते हैं रोज के आइडिया, कितने आते हैं आपको? 4 to 5 रोज के आइडियाज आते हैं। आप कई लोगों को तो एक मिनट में 4 to 5 आते हैं। What is the idea? Sorry? काफी डाइवर्सिफाइड क्या? What is an idea? The question here, define कर सकते हैं आइडिया को? Idea is solves the problem. Solution to a problem is an idea. Clues to help us solve a problem. Anyone else? Sorry? माइक में बोल रहे हैं, मेरे कानों में ना वैक्स बहुत ज्यादा इंक्रीज हो गया बैंगलोर से दिल्ली आके।
Sir, any strategy to meet objective, I would say.
Strategy to meet
Objective.
ऑब्जेक्टिव। पर आइडिया होता किसको कहते हो आप? आइडिया आइडिया आपके माइक में आता है? ऐसे ऐसे तो नहीं। कहाँ पे आता है आइडिया?
सर दिमाग में, like randomly, sir.
रैंडमली आता है, लेकिन किस कौन से हिस्से में आता है? आपके हाथों में आता है, नाक
सर,
में आता है,
दिमाग
आंखों
में।
में आता है, दिमाग में आता है?
Yes.
दिमाग में किसको कहते हैं दिमाग? माइंड। माइंड, व्हाट इज माइंड? सॉरी,
Thoughts.
कनेक्शन ऑफ न्यूरॉन्स को माइंड कहते हैं, ठीक है, वो तो ब्रेन कह सकते हो, राइट? माइंड क्या कहते हैं? कॉन्शियसनेस को माइंड कहते हैं? और यार तुम तो स्पिरिचुअलिटी पे ले गए हो। कॉन्शियसनेस ऑफ थॉट। सो थॉट वर्ड आई थिंक बेटर है। थॉट्स को माइंड कहते हैं, राइट? तो थॉट्स क्या होते हैं? चलो वो कहने देते हैं, नहीं तो फिर तो संत बन जाएंगे फिर हम। तो आप वे थॉट्स मान लेते हैं, माइंड के अंदर सब थॉट्स आते हैं, राइट? तो आइडिया इज ए थॉट, आइडिया इज ए थॉट, पक्का, राइट? ये तो पक्का है कि आइडिया इज ए थॉट, और तो कुछ हो नहीं सकता, थॉट तो पक्का होना चाहिए। एवरी थॉट इज एन आइडिया। हाँ, तो कुछ तो डिफरेंस भी है, थॉट तो है, लेकिन क्या एक्स्ट्रा क्या है उसमें? ऐसी थॉट, सॉरी, इनोवेशन, वो अब एक नई डेफिनेशन आ गई। तो इनोवेशन इज वेरी, सी, एवरी थॉट इज नॉट एन आइडिया, ये हम सब मान चुके हैं। लेकिन इसका मतलब कोई ना कोई थॉट तो ऐसी, कोई कोई एस्पेक्ट तो होगा जिसको आप आइडिया कहेंगे, पर्पस। तो थॉट विल, दैट विल सर्व ए पर्पस। एनीथिंग एल्स?
सर जब कोई अनसॉल्व प्रॉब्लम है हमारी और हमारा थॉट उसको सॉल्व कर रहा है तो वी कैन कॉल दैट एन आइडिया।
हाँ, तो इसी का भी प्रॉब्लम वर्ड आपने यूज किया, हमने कहा कि वो हिंड्रेंस, राइट, जो स्टॉपेजेस है। तो अल्टीमेटली कुछ कर रहा है, कुछ डायनेमिक पार्ट है इसमें। तो क्या कर रहा है वो? कुछ चेंज कर रहा है चीज को, राइट? तो आइडिया इज द जर्मिनेशन ऑफ चेंज, ए थॉट दैट जर्मिनेट्स चेंज। बिकॉज आइडिया पक्का नहीं है, अभी तो आइडिया है, वो बनेगा जब रिफ्लेक्ट होगा, जब एक्सप्रेस होगा, जब वो उस फॉर्म, शेप, उसका स्ट्रक्चर देंगे आप, उसमें एफर्ट लगेगा, तब वो आइडिया कुछ स्ट्रक्चर फॉर्म में आएगा। लेकिन आइडिया इज ए थॉट दैट जर्मिनेट्स चेंज इन योर माइंड, राइट? एवरी थॉट इज नॉट ए आइडिया, बट every idea has to be a thought. Okay, and that those thoughts that germinate change. So all those thoughts that will give you some germination, some sort of a germination, समझ रहे हैं क्या? जैसे सीड में से जर्मिनेशन होता है, वैसे एक फूटेगा, ऐसे चमकेगा, राइट? कौन देगा आइडिया? कौन सा है, राइट? कौए को आया था जो, जब उसको पानी, जब उसने मटके में पत्थर डालने वाली जो स्टोरी की थी स्कूल में आपने, तो वो आइडिया, आप कहते हैं ना आइडिया आया उसको, वो ऐसे वाला आइडिया, वो टाइप का। दैट मीन वो ऐसे आने का मतलब क्या है? कोई चेंज को देखोगे आप। तो चेंज कहाँ से आएगी? जब आप सोचोगे किसी के बारे में, तब चेंज। क्या सोचना है? स्टेप वन, स्टेप टू। स्टेप वन, स्टेप टू क्या है? पिकअप ए रेलिवेंट ट्रेंड और सी कि ये दुनिया चेंज होने वाली है बिकॉज ऑफ टेक्नोलॉजी, बिकॉज ऑफ ऑर्गेनाइजेशन चेंज, बिकॉज ऑफ ऑपरेशंस, दैट वर्ल्ड इज चेंजिंग, राइट? ये सब हम बोल रहे हैं, ये सब टेक्नोलॉजी से, ये सब तरीकों से, ये सब ऑर्गेनाइजेशनल चेंजेस से और स्ट्रक्चरल चेंजेस से कुछ कुछ दुनिया बदल रही है। अब जब सभी बदल ही रहा है तो हम क्यों ना बदले उसको, राइट? तो वो हमारा स्टेप टू है कि यदि बदलना है तो उसमें कोई दिक्कत, कोई प्रॉब्लम, कोई स्टॉपेज है जो हम बदलना चाहते हैं। ये जो हम बदलना चाहने वाली जो बात है, दैट इज कॉल्ड डिजाइन। हर्बर्ट साइमन, जिसको नोबेल प्राइज मिला था बाउंडेड रैशनैलिटी के लिए, ही डिफाइंड everyone designs who thinks about changing the existing situation to a preferred one. आप existing situation से खुश नहीं हो, राइट, या चाहते हो उसको चेंज करना, तो आप जो प्रेफर्ड सिचुएशन डिफाइन करें, अब आप उसका जो पाथ है, उस प्रेफर्ड सिचुएशन का पाथ, वो जब आपको डिजाइन करना है, प्लस उस प्रेफर्ड सिचुएशन को डिफाइन करना है, इस प्रोसेस को डिजाइनिंग कहते हैं। ओके, तो यू गॉट द डेफिनेशन ऑफ इन्वेंशन। इन्वेंशन क्या है? टेक्निकल सॉल्यूशन टू ए प्रॉब्लम which is novel and non-obvious, and of course it is having some application. So वो patentable है, novel in the world. And design is transforming a current situation to a preferred situation, right? And that is the designing part. So to design, you need to define the preferred situation, and also understand the current situation, and also define the path to that preferred situation. जब आप ये बता देंगे कि आज ये दुनिया ऐसी है, पर मुझे खुशी नहीं है इस दुनिया से, मतलब मैं चाहता हूँ कि ये वाली दुनिया से ये वाली दुनिया ज़्यादा अच्छी है, तो ये वाली दुनिया जो आपको ये डिफाइन बनानी होगी ना, कि ये वाली दुनिया ज़्यादा अच्छी है, ये ऐसी है, ऐसी दुनिया दिखती है मुझे, जो मुझे देखनी है, तो आपका वो विजन आएगा। जब आप वो दुनिया दिखा दोगे, अब आप कहोगे ये दुनिया तो ये वाली है, ये तो बेरंगी है, इसमें तो कलर्स नहीं है, ये वाला जो कलरफुल दुनिया मैंने बनाई है, इस दुनिया से इस दुनिया तक जाने का भी रास्ता ढूंढना है मुझे। तो जब आप इसका पाथ बनाओगे, तो ये आपके डिजाइन करेंगे, दो चीजें डिजाइन करेंगे, एग्जिस्टिंग सिचुएशन टू ए प्रेफर्ड सिचुएशन एंड द पाथ टू दैट प्रेफर्ड सिचुएशन, कैसे जाओगे उस तक। अब ये जो पाथ आप डिजाइन करने लगोगे ना, इसमें रुकावटें आएंगी, उनको आप प्रॉब्लम्स कहते हैं, क्योंकि वो हिंड्रेंसेस है, राइट। जब ये पाथ डिफाइन करेंगे तो आप कहेंगे यहाँ से मुझे वहाँ जाना है, तो लेकिन वहाँ जाने में मुझे ये यहाँ नहीं जा सकता क्योंकि ये अटक गया है, ये जो अटकना है ये प्रॉब्लम है। क्या इसको मैं सॉल्व करूँ, ऐसे सॉल्व करूँ कि यहाँ से वहाँ पहुँच जाऊँ, वो प्रॉब्लम को सॉल्यूशनिंग है। यदि वो सॉल्यूशन ऐसा हो जो बिल्कुल नया हो दुनिया में और नॉन ऑब्वियस हो, तब वो इन्वेंशन है। तो ऑन द पाथ टू ए प्रेफर्ड सिचुएशन, व्हेन यू आर डिजाइनिंग, राइट, ऑन दैट पाथ यू पोटेंशियली कैन हैव हाउ मेनी इन्वेंशंस। जितनी रुकावटें हैं उतनी इन्वेंशन हो सकती है, जितनी प्रॉब्लम्स आपको मिलेंगी आपके लिए अपॉर्चुनिटी है, राइट। यू गॉट दिस होल डेफिनेशन, क्योंकि ये डेफिनेशन इतनी कंफ्यूजिंग है कि किसी को पता ही नहीं लगता कि ये बोल क्या गए हैं हम। डिजाइनिंग क्या होती है, इन्वेंशन क्या होती है, प्रॉब्लम क्या होती है, आइडिया क्या होता है, और सॉल्यूशन क्या होता है। आज तक आप बता लीजिए, आज तक किसी ने क्लास में कभी नहीं बताया नहीं, क्योंकि उनको खुद ही नहीं पता। मुझे किसी ने नहीं बताया, मैं ढूंढ ढूंढ के 50 साल हो गए ढूंढते हुए, अब पता लगा मुझे। ठीक, थॉट्स क्या है, आइडियाज क्या है, प्रॉब्लम्स क्या है, डिजाइन क्या है, इन्वेंशन क्या है, सॉल्यूशन क्या है। इज इट क्लियर? तो अब हमको सॉल्यूशन चाहिए, और जब हम सॉल्यूशंस निकाल लेंगे, राइट, ये जो दो और तीन प्रॉब्लम्स जो आप पाथ आप डिजाइन कर रहे हैं प्रेफर्ड सिचुएशन पे जाने के लिए, फ्रॉम द करंट सिचुएशन वहां तक जाने के लिए आपको कुछ रुकावटें आ रही हैं, जिनको दो तीन मेजर रुकावटें आप देखिए कौन सी हैं। उनके लिए आइडियाज जनरेट करने हैं। आइडियाज क्या है, क्या कुछ चेंज करना है, राइट, दैट यू नीड टू डिफाइन। यू कैनॉट से कि अब हम यार ये ऐसे हो गए ना, हम चलो चंद्रमा पे चलते हैं, ये आइडिया है मेरा कि यहाँ की बजाय मून पे चलते हैं, राइट। तो वो कैसे जाना है वो तो बताओ। जब तक वो नहीं बताओगे तब तक वो आइडिया का मतलब नहीं है। वो क्या है, एस्पिरेशन इज नॉट एन आइडिया। ओके, व्हेन यू एस्पायर टू डू समथिंग एंड यू से मेरा आइडिया ये है कि दुनिया में गरीबी खत्म हो जानी चाहिए, अब ये आइडिया है आपका? दिस कैनॉट बी आइडिया, राइट। कैसे होगी वो आइडिया हो सकता है, क्योंकि ये कहते हैं हम दुनिया में ऑनेस्टी होनी चाहिए। ओके, so now you have to generate ideas, combine those ideas, and also create solutions. What will be the solution? That hindrance that we defined, the problem that we defined, उसको solve करना चाहिए उस solution। तो ऐसे 7 solutions निकाल लें आपको आज शाम तक। जब ये 7 solutions निकल जाएंगे, then we will evaluate these 7 situation solutions on 3 criteria। 3 अलग अलग क्राइटेरिया में उनकी फिजिबिलिटी क्या है, उनकी बिजनेस वैल्यू या कॉम्बैट वैल्यू क्या है, जो एक्चुअल मिलिट्री वैल्यू क्या है, और फाइनली उसमें नॉवेल्टी कितनी, उसमें टेक्निकल एनहेंसमेंट कितना। ये 3 क्राइटेरिया पे वी आर गोइंग टू इवैल्यूएट, एंड देन यू हैव टू मेक ए प्रेजेंटेशन ऑन दिस। Each team has to make a small presentation on what you have done. Okay, so I have a case study, we'll come to that case study, but what we are expecting in this are some methods or techniques। ये आपको 7 कॉन्सेप्ट दिख रहे हैं, लेफ्ट हैंड साइड पे 7 कॉन्सेप्ट लिखे हुए हैं अप्रोक्सीमेटली, दिख में सोच लीजिए लिखे हुए हैं कुछ। 3 क्राइटेरिया है, नॉवेल्टी, कॉम्बैट वैल्यू और इफेक्टिवनेस इन दैट, एंड फिजिबिलिटी, कितने पॉसिबिलिटी है फिजिबिलिटी। ये 3 अलग अलग क्राइटेरिया है, ठीक है। इनको आप इवेल्युएट करेंगे यूजिंग ए एक्सेल शीट दैट आई एम गोइंग टू शेयर व्हेन यू रीच टू दैट स्टेप 4। ओके, उससे पहले अभी आपको अपने आप करना है, सोचना। जब आप वहां पहुंच जाएंगे तब मुझसे मुखातिब होंगे आप, फिर आप बताइएगा मुझसे, बताना कि अब मुझे चाहिए ये एक्सेल शीट। और वो 7 सॉल्यूशंस आपको निकालने हैं विदाउट यूज दिस। ये वंस यू हैव द 7 सॉल्यूशंस रिटन, राइट, then we will evaluate based on novelty, effectiveness, and the feasibility, and we'll create this chart. This we call the strategic prioritization map of the inventions that you will have। तो ये जो गोले गोले जो सर्कल्स है गोल गोल, इनका जो साइज है दैट इंडिकेट्स द कॉम्बैट इफेक्टिवनेस, ओके, रिलेटिव साइज. And x-axis is the feasibility and y-axis is the technical enhancement compared to the existing solution or novelty that you have. If you get very high on the y-axis, relatively, you potentially will have an invention. क्योंकि novelty very high. And if you get feasibility high on the x-axis पे, तो वो तो immediate solution दे सकते हैं. लेकिन best is कि biggest bubble if you get, which is the value of combat effectiveness की, you basically are saying the best solution ये है जिसका biggest bubble है. Okay, but तीनों perspective से हम study कर सकते हैं valid. Okay, so you step 5, 6, 7 are okay. Actually एक step miss हो गया ना. Okay, नहीं 7 step. 7 step important है सबसे. 7 step is the most important step. If you miss that, you will not be able to do the first 6 steps. Okay, you understand the 7 step? क्या है 7 step? ऐसे ही मुंडी हिला रहा है. आपने देखा क्या 7 step क्या है? क्या है? नहीं याद ही नहीं है, वो दिख भी रहा था आपने. 7 step क्या है? 7th step लिखा हुआ है. तो जबकि 6 के 6 steps if you do not enjoy, you will not be able to do this. Okay, तो जॉय की आवश्यकता है. अब आप स्टार्ट कीजिए ये काम, और कब तक कर लेंगे वो अब आपके ऊपर है. तब तक आई एम विद यू. एंड ऑल्सो दिस फ्रेमवर्क व्हेन यू गेट टू दैट AHP, ये AHP वाला एक एक्सेल शीट आई एम गोइंग टू शेयर दैट यू कैन. सो आई एम गोइंग टू अपलोड टू दैट ईच ग्रुप. ओके, ग्रुप तो वही 5 के 5 वही ग्रुप है, वही चले. इन्होंने खुद ही चूज किया. ओके, आपको अब मैंने तो बहुत बोला है, आपने सुना है. कैन वी स्टार्ट नाउ? कैन वी स्टार्ट? यस नो एंथुजियाज्म बहुत कम हो गया एकदम से. हाँ, लंच ब्रेक तो नीरज सर बताएंगे. लंच ब्रेक तक तब मैं आपको PPT भेज देता हूँ, तब तक आपके ग्रुप पे भेज देता हूँ.